The divided self, the story of reunion. So many of my questions that have become this art had to do with the fundamental anguish of our human story of why do we not simply battle outside of ourselves? Why do we battle inside of ourselves? And as St. Paul said, until the battle inside is resolved, until inner peace is discovered, there will be no outer peace. And yet, one of the great keys, because none of this is an illustration of something I thought I would tell you about, but rather more like a musician as this music flowed, as this story began to appear. One of the fundamental beauties is this story of tears, meaning we can see this structure, because the mother will say that as we return home, matter, mater, mother, the story of our atoms, that it isn't that the crown is of jewels, but rather it is tears. How do we make sense of this very difficult journey, where the battle is not simply in the outer world, but within the territories of oneself? But this is where deep history and myth helps us a great deal. And one of the great gifts I've been given is that it's flowed through my hand, it's flowed through my breath, that this is the oldest technology imaginable, meaning that through my breath, through my hand, through my heart, through my questions, the story that's emanated is a story that needed to return us to intimacy. Why have we struggled so greatly as humans? Why do we not know who we are? What would be the point? And this is why the mother returns in so much of the narrative in the hieroglyph of the human soul. Because she says, I love all of my children. I'm the knowledge of your atoms. There are no evil atoms. If you don't like your stories, tell better stories. Begin with the story you tell yourself about who you think you are. And this is what helps us understand why, as the hieroglyph of the human soul, it has been emerging over these years, as this cave painting has been growing, as this story of Mothership, the knowledge of our atoms, has been scintillating, revealing the arc of the ancestors, meaning it's not ourselves alone, but we are composed of every human story. We are composed of the idea of what does it mean to be human. This is what scintillates as our atomic being. And when we perceive this, we begin to answer the question that she asked me inwardly. When did your atoms become so generous to stick together to create one of you? When you remember this, you'll begin to remember who you are. So the question then of the divided self is, why did we forget? What was the point? And in so much of my work, going back to my painting in the mind of an ancient god, we'll begin to see a multidimensional narrative, which isn't talking about ancient Atlantis, an ancient civilization that existed in one form, but across millions of years in many forms. But also the story here that we are not the outcome of new arrivals, but we're at a point of being able to see that maybe the division that we feel within ourselves is actually what we've inherited in our DNA as human trauma, meaning that we divided. And the right angle that I've talked about a lot in this, in so many different ways, has to do with the story of I love, therefore I am, the knowledge of the mother, the knowledge of the ancestors, the knowledge of the goddess. I love, therefore I am. In that we connect. That's why this is my home. That's why the goddess, the mother, are able to be free, to be present, to be naked with us, because that's the level of truth and honor we're being asked to bring to the story. Because the story of what's wrong with the neighbor doesn't work. Maybe that's the story, though, that has gotten us here. So we're full of fury and anger and fierceness against an enemy that out of our own fear overwhelms us and makes us feel impotent, incapable. And part of the cry here, I realized, and that's why art really isn't about just the artist, was the cry in the dark that said, how do we reconcile this hatred? How do we look at deep history, meaning back to the fall of Atlantis in our mythology, and the whole division of that which was driven by greed and selfishness and ego, and that which sought the one. But by the time they're here, it has become the narrative of I love, therefore I am, and I think, therefore I am. And the divided self is that which, when the reunion is in the heart, when the story is in the home, when the technology is the first technology, paint, breath, the human story, nothing being done for us, but a picture that's saying maybe. In the story of who and what we are, we've journeyed, not to get away from ourselves, but to finally find a self that is so full of meaning and richness that what heals us is not who to be against or what battle to engage, but the etiquette of when we are home. Let us put that aside. Let us have dinner together. Let us honor the things that enrich us simply because we can. And I also feel the mother here says, I love all of my children, and your stories of hate do not impress me. Impress me with what you love. You're closer to home than you think.